Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. One of you take your seats. Good morning. I'm Ross Sandler, professor of law here at New York Law School and director of the Center for New York City Law, and I welcome you to New York Law School and to our first City Law Breakfast of 2008. It's an important breakfast because we have Christine Quinn here, who is Speaker of the City Council and has been an enormous force and important person in the city for quite a while, and we're delighted that she is here. We are going to begin in just a moment, but those of who are standing, there are seats around, and if you could try and get seats, and there may be some more brought in. These breakfasts are sponsored by Verizon, Con Edison, the Murray Goodgold Foundation, the law firm of Greenberg Traurig, and we're thankful for their support that allows us to do these breakfasts and to have them without cost. I'd like to welcome some of your colleagues. Robert Jackson is here. I don't know where he is. Is he there? There. Welcome here. There. Okay. I'd also like to welcome Patricia Lancaster, who had quite a week as building commissioner. Our next speaker, Robert Tierney. Where is he? Robert Tierney. I understand many people would like to are sending in questions already. I'd also like to acknowledge someone who's been here before, but Marla Simpson, who is head of the Mayor's Office of Contract Services and has done so much in an area that has consistently been seen as a challenge for the city, its contracting system and its processing. Today, Christine Quinn is here, Speaker of the City Council, a position she's held since 2006. Just from my personal observation, she's brought a style and a level of competence to that position that has served the city enormously well. She comes to that position after having served as an assistant to Tom Duane and has been an enormously important force on the west side of Manhattan, where I personally had some opportunity to work with her and remember well her competence and quickness. We're delighted to have Christine Quinn here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ross, and that was a very nice introduction. And we did get to work together on the West Side on a problem when, I don't know, when the court asked you to take on the issue of working with us on the West Side on tour buses. That might have seemed like, oh, well, we could all work on that. You had no idea probably you were stepping into an unbelievable hornet's nest of, like, intense feelings. But you did a great job and actually helped us move what was a very big quality of life problem forward to a much safer place for the neighborhood. So thank you for that work, and also thank you for everything you're doing here and also for everything you do with City Law. It's a book, a publication that we really use a great deal in the City Council and helps give us good ideas that we then try to steal and hope no one remembers that you wrote about them first, which is the best form of flattery. And thank you all for being here today. I may or may not be all the things that you listed, but one thing I'm certainly not is usually punctual, unfortunately. So I apologize for being a little late. It was not my fault or Commissioner Tierney's or Commissioner Lancaster's fault, but there was a construction on Barrack and Canal, and we're in need of... No, it's a DOT issue. They need an enforcement agent. We've already called it in. So don't worry about it. It's been taken care of. I did, after I said to my staff member, call that in, I said I did rezone that block so they could build that, but nonetheless, I don't take responsibility for the traffic. But thank you all, and thank you, Councilmember Jackson, for being here today. And I just want to spend a little time this morning talking, and then I'm happy to take any questions, about one of the things that we've tried to focus on a great deal in the past 2 years. You know, one of the things I said when I got elected as Speaker in my acceptance speech and in a lot of the conversations and speeches I gave after that was I really wanted to make the Council more relevant in the lives of New Yorkers. Because if we're not relevant, if people don't see us as an entity that is in fact there every day working for them, They're not going to pick up the phone and call us. They're not going to email us when they have a problem. And if they're not doing that, then we really are not doing our job and have little reason to be here. Now, how do you become relevant in people's lives? Well, one, they have to know you're working for them. How do they know you're working for them? Well, one of the ways they know you're working for them is if you put out a construct, in my opinion, of ethics reform and an infrastructure around ethics that sends a message that we're doing everything we can to limit outside influence. We're doing everything we can to keep the focus inside City Hall on the needs of New Yorkers. Now, some people said, well, why do we in the City Council have to do that? We haven't had, huge Jack Abramoff scandals or anything like that. And I'm not saying I saw any around the corner. But any time there's anything like that in any legislative body anywhere in the country, it makes it harder for all of us who are in government. And the fact that those scandals had been happening, I think, put an even bigger responsibility on all of us in City Hall to send a message to New Yorkers that we work for them. The other reason I felt very strongly about this is I first started working around City Hall in 1989 as a housing advocate. And at that point, there were very few lobbyists. Mostly you had kind of, people like me, 20-something poorly dressed people who tried to find clothes that were appropriate to wear to City Hall that weren't blue jeans, who stood around on the steps begging for more money for programs. Really, in that period of time, I remember there were 2 paid lobbyists, one of whom, one of the Saturdays we had to lobby on the budget, brought cookies for the council members and didn't share with the other lobbyists. And I remember exactly who she is and who she lobbies for now. No, I'm not really kidding, actually, but it's had no influence at all. And over the years, for a whole host of reasons, the number of lobbyists at City Hall has greatly expanded. And being a lobbyist and a government affairs professional, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you have the entrance to City Hall at times choked with lobbyists, it makes you think, have people now thought, if you're a small or medium-sized nonprofit, to get your voice heard, to get your program looked at, to get your program funded, you have to hire somebody? You don't want people to have to think that. If they choose to do that, that's their choice. But you don't want them to feel they have to do that. So that's why almost on day one we started this effort. And one of the first things we did, and I know in the Mayor's Council, Anthony Crowell is here. He was somewhere. Where's Anthony? He's outside on the phone, and now I've embarrassed him because he stepped out and he's not listening to me, even though I'm giving him a lovely shout-out. But anyway, one of the first things we did, working with Anthony and our General Counsel's office, many of whom, Liz Fine and others, are here today, was write a lobbying reform law in the city. And the point of that was to kind of meet the goals that I outlined, to put a piece of legislation on the books that said very clearly and strongly that the amount of money lobbyists can contribute is extremely limited, that lobbyists have to, in greater detail, list the visits they have with elected officials and how many they have and how frequently with elected officials and their staffs. To also say that no gifts can go from lobbyists to elected officials. Now, some people say, well, what can a lunch really affect? Is a lunch going to buy your vote? Nobody's that cheap of a date. Well, that's not really the point. Because there's impressions out there in the public's mind that there's all this, eating and feeding of council members and that kind of a thing, and it sends the wrong message. And that's really what this law in part was about, was sending a message to New Yorkers that you don't have to have a lobbyist to talk to us. Now, that was our first effort. We continued this in a very important way in a really tremendous, almost historic overhaul of our campaign finance laws. Now, we were very lucky, in my opinion, to have the best public campaign finance program anywhere in the country. And when you talk to elected officials from other parts of the country, they really know how terrific the system here is in New York. But we wanted to make it even better. We wanted to make it better for a couple of reasons. One, there's public money involved in this, and we wanted to make sure we had the strongest set of regulations on the books to really protect the public purse. So to say if money's going to go to an election to the greatest degree possible, we want to know that's a competitive election. Now, you never really know. Sometimes people say something's an incredible horse race and it's a blowout, but to the best degree of factors, we're not giving money to sure winners who don't need it. Two, we wanted to make the program as accessible to participants as possible. Because you can have the greatest program, And if it's so complicated, nobody opts into it, you've done nothing but write a lovely dissertation on campaign finance, but nothing that's practical. So we had to make it user-friendly. We also wanted to reform it to say to people, we don't want a system where only big contributions fund campaigns and only big contributions matter. So we even more strongly limited lobbyists' ability to give, and also took a major step to incentivize small contributions. So it used to be that $250 got you a 4-to-1 match. It's now at $175, you get a 6-to-1 match. It's the same overall amount of money, but it's saying to New Yorkers, your smaller neighborhood contributions really matter to government. And then we took a very significant step forward, which was significantly limiting the amount of money that people who do business with the City of New York can give people who are in office or running for office when they are doing business or attempting to get business with the City of New York. Now, it's not easy to define doing business with the City of New York. We're a pretty big entity. But to the best degree possible, we've tried to capture people who are trying to get contracts, people who are trying to get land use changes in their favor, and everything that really means doing business. Now, look, we didn't want to, though, create a situation where, a Little League asks the City Council for $5,000, and then everybody on the Little League board can't give you money, because that's the wrong way to do campaign finance. But I think we've hit a tremendous balance here and really come up with something that, in my opinion, and I may be biased, but I don't think I'm that biased, in my opinion, is a gold standard for campaign finance reform in this country. We can always make it better, but we've done something here that I think is really quite extraordinary. Now, to make the council really relevant, obviously, in my opinion, you have to take these important ethics steps. But you also have to change how government works to send a message that we've really created an ethics structure where we're focused on New Yorkers, and we're also making ourselves more efficient to focus on New Yorkers' needs. That's why we put in place something called Council Stat. It's one of the things I realized when I was, before becoming Speaker, is I was dealing with problems in my district office. And I had no idea if Robert Jackson was dealing with the same problems in Northern Manhattan, or if Joe Adaba was dealing with the same problems in Rockaway. Well, if you don't know if something is a local problem, a borough-wide problem, or a city-wide problem, you don't know how to respond to it as the institution of the council. Because borough-wide problems should have responses that correspond, and city-wide problems should have city-wide responses. The council offices never talked to each other. So in response to that, we are now in the final stages of putting something up for all our offices. It's already begun in a lot, called Council Stat. All of the district offices will be hooked into one computer system. Once a month, council members will report to the Speaker's office, not the names of who they helped. And we're, in fact, going to change the rules of the City Council to make sure the Speaker can never get the names, because it's not about helping the Speaker touch more New Yorkers and say, oh, Robert Jackson fixed your problem. No, I really did. It's about getting the types of complaints so we can chart what are New Yorkers calling us about? We need to know that, because our budget, our policy, our legislation should not be in response to what we read in the papers. It should be in response to what New Yorkers are seeking our assistance on. 2, we can track what's local, what's borough-wide, what's city-wide. We can also track, Robert's the chair of our Black, Latino, and Asian caucus. We can now chart the districts of the members of the caucus and see if there are particular issues most affecting those council members and their districts, and we could work with the caucus on a response. We can also now see, for the first time ever, what type of complaints we're getting, and are our staff people trained to deal with those complaints? Once a month, we're going to have conference calls with the district office staff people from all the offices so we can develop best practices for dealing with illegal evictions, best practices for dealing with traffic on Varick Street, which might not be having the Speaker herself call DOT. Best practices for dealing with senior citizens who might need, extra support. We also now, for the first time ever, will have a computer system where council members can actually track cases. When we were setting up Council Stat, we found out some members were still tracking cases on paper. That's the way I started doing it in 1992 when I was Chief of Staff to Councilmember Tom Duane. That won't be the case anymore. So now you'll be able to go into the computer. Robert can go in and type in the name Quinn and see if that, slacker of a staff member, Chris Quinn, actually has too many open cases and figure out why that is and deal with it. We'll also now, if there's, construction going on in Varrican Canal, go into council stat and quickly send an email to anybody who lives in that area saying, give yourself a little more time in the morning when you need to go. It's a way for we and the council really to be in the 21st century, serve people better, do our most important job more effectively. Now, I really believe constituent service is probably our most important job. Our second most important job, I think everyone would agree, is passing the budget every year with the mayor. We have the fourth largest budget in the country. There's the country's, the state of California, the state of New York, the city of New York. There's some rumor that Texas might be bigger than ours now, but I'm not going to address that. I'm pretending it's not. I'm sticking that we're the fourth largest, because Texas will rise and fall, I'm sure. The fourth largest budget in the country. We're talking, as much as a $56 billion budget. And for decades, the council dealt around the edges of the budget. And we played games with the mayor where in good years every mayor would cut every program the council ever put in, we'd put it back in, we'd spend months traveling around the city saying, the world was going to fall apart, and it was just a game. And the budget, your money, shouldn't be a game. It should be incredibly serious. And it should be a budget, a document that's actually about long-term planning and planning for the future. That's one of the reasons why we're pushing Albany to change the laws around the budget to allow the city to have a rainy day fund, to make changes to the Financial Emergency Act so we actually could have a savings account where we could have, in theory, put the billion-dollar surpluses we had in the past 2 years aside in a savings account to draw from them this year when we're not going to have a surplus in the city's budget. But we also wanted to change things that were in our power. We started in the city council by doing that first, by changing the way council members had to request initiatives in the budget. I mean, Robert can tell you, it used to be you'd go into the first Democratic caucus of the budget and there'd be a list of new initiatives, and some council members would say, well, nobody asked me what I wanted in the budget, and I want $10 million for this, I want $5 million for that, and things would just get added. You have to be more thoughtful than that. So now you have to, if you want to put a new initiative or enhancement in the budget, you have to write a proposal. If you're working with a nonprofit group, you have to get a letter from that group saying, in fact, they want to participate. You have to get co-sponsorship from your colleagues, and each member has a limited number of programs that they can co-sponsor. A member came to me and said, I don't like this. I only have one co-sponsorship left, and I have to choose between the AIDS initiative and the senior initiative. And I said, that's right, because ultimately what the budget is about is choices. And even in the best of times, we'll never have enough resources to do everything. So we've tried to change that at home at first in the city council with that recognition. We've also, as part of starting first within our own house, made it very clear to the mayor that we don't want to continue this game of the budget dance. And we want to have programs looked at on their merit, not on whether they first started with the city council or with the mayor's office, because who had the idea 3 seconds before somebody else isn't the point. The point is it a good program? Does it work? Will it help people? And that's why we push to get things like library services baselined in the budget, funding for parks workers baselined in the budget, summer youth jobs baselined in the budget. And why does that matter? Let's talk about summer youth jobs for a second. The way the budget used to work, everybody loves the Summer Youth Job Program, and our DYCD commissioner does a great job running it. But it was a council initiative first once a gazillion years ago, and therefore would get cut every year by every mayor, which meant the DYCD commissioner might not know till the end of June how much money she had and how many kids should be able to employ. So that means we want this woman with 3 or 4 days' notice to go out and hire thousands and thousands of kids for summer jobs. That is a terrible way to run a program and a terrible way to spend your money. So now summer youth jobs are baselined in the city budget. So the commissioner has a sense of knowing how much money she'll have and how many jobs. What that doesn't mean they'll never get cut. We might, we're going to have to look at that tough issue of cuts this year, but it does mean that a program that's been baselined, that was once a council program, won't get cut any more than a mayoral program just because we thought of it first, whoever the we was at that moment in time. We've also continued to make changes. Oh, and Mike McMahon would kill me. We've also baselined, to make sure he knows we said this right, we've also baselined sanitation pickup, supplemental sanitation pickup in the boroughs outside of Manhattan, which is a very important thing to make sure there's really a message that we're trying to take care of all 5 of the boroughs in the city. We've also said, in the way we've done the budget, that New Yorkers need to know, in the greatest detail possible, what we're spending their money on. So we've made changes in the parts of our budget that deal with allocations of grants from the City Council. So last year, for the first time ever, the budget didn't just say XYZ Little League $5,000. It said XYZ Little League $5,000. I mean, this one's obvious, but within a sentence of what the money would be for and what council member or members or caucus or delegation requested the money. And if you went into Schedule C in our budget, you could see who requested what money. People can draw then whatever conclusions they want from that, but people got to know to connect the dollars to the member to their district. And this year in the budget, we're going to do that for the first time ever for capital budget initiatives. So you'll be able to see if it's fixing up a library or a school or a cultural institution, who requested it, and that use of the money and that council member sponsorship will actually be attached in the budget documents, which we'll make accessible from the council's webpage as well. Now, we've also done something very significant in the budget, which is two things. One, the charter specifies that the mayor, not just this mayor, every mayor, has to list things in the budget in units of appropriations in lines. Now, that may sound a little policy wonky, but it matters, because some city agencies have 2 units of appropriation: personnel services and other than personnel services, which means that every person from the commissioner to the cleaning staff are in one line. So if you want to know how many inspectors there are, or how many analysts there are, and how many caseworkers there are, you can't really break that out by going into the budget because there's one lump sum of staffing. Now, that's not a way for people or legislators to know where tax dollars are going. Now, but if an average New Yorker goes into the budget, they're not necessarily going to know that, inspectors are 632 U of A and subsection 802 of subpart B. So we've worked with the administration to begin writing city budgets with U of A's. But we've also, working with the administration and the Independent Budget Office, begun changing the way we write the budgets even more significantly. We won't be able to do this overnight in every city agency, but we're moving to programmatic budget. So if you're a New Yorker and you want to know what we're spending money on, you're going to think of a topic you're interested in: senior centers, food stamps. We want to make it so you could go into the budget, look in that area, and then actually see the staffing assignments underneath that area. And we're working with the administration and the IBO to actually take, and the mayor talked about this somewhat in his State of the City address yesterday, to take that programmatic budgeting, so you can see the issue, the line, the money, and then connect it to the mayor's management report. So you can see issue, line, money, and is it working? So if we have X number of people doing pothole repair for Y amount of money, are the potholes getting filled quicker or slower than they were before? And that's important so New Yorkers see whether we're spending their money effectively. It's important for us because not every time we've allocated dollars in the city has it worked out well. And sometimes things you think are going to be great successes aren't. And you need a way to be able to identify that quickly so you can then redirect the money as effectively and efficiently as possible. And New Yorkers also have a right to know, are things working when we're assigning your tax dollars to them? We're also this year going to start a new effort of making sure that when there are mid-year budget allocations, that the Finance Committee actually votes publicly on those, and that those are also listed in a transparent manner that people can see them throughout the course of the year. Now, I think if you take all of these initiatives together, whether it's lobbying reform or campaign finance reform, and I see we have a whole table from the Campaign Finance Board, which I didn't see before when I was talking, so thank you guys for being here, and I would say, without a doubt, and I know everyone from my staff would agree with me, we could not have gotten through the campaign finance reform without the terrific work of the CFB staff, so thank you guys so much for all of your help and work with us. I think we may have driven Fritz off the board, though, which I feel a little bit responsible and badly about, but you'd give him my best. But all of these efforts to try to improve the ethics infrastructure of the City of New York, to make the budget one that's transparent and accessible, to make the council more efficient and focused on the needs of New Yorkers. We've really done all of this for a very simple reason, to try to serve New Yorkers better, to make sure that when Robert and I go out into neighborhoods that we represent or other parts of the city, we can actually look people in the eye and say we're doing everything we can to keep our focus on you and your family every day. We're doing everything we can to spend your money wisely and efficiently. We're doing everything we can to make sure that if you have a question about the budget, about how your money's getting spent, about how the council works, that you can find that answer yourself. You can get it from us, but sometimes people want to get that answer themselves so they can confirm it. Those are the type of reforms and efforts we've conducted over the past 2 years. We are enormously proud of them. It's a kind of work we're going to continue to do over the next 2 years. I could tell you the day, hour, and time we had left if the mayor had given me the clock he has in his office that he promised. He hasn't. I think he could buy me a clock. But I will say it's a little bit less than 2 years. So thank you all very much for being here. And just before I close, I want to thank my great staff, many of whom who are here today at this table and in other parts of the room, because, you know, and I think Robert would agree, Robert and I get to have great ideas, dump them on staff, and then leave the room and come back 5 minutes later and say, you haven't figured out yet, where's the bill? So thank you all for being such terrific staff, and thank you all for being here. Yeah, sure. Be happy to.
Well, that was a very exciting rundown of tremendous accomplishments. We have microphones on both sides for questioners. I noticed the audience didn't rise and applaud when you said you were going to link the budget to the mayor's management report, but those of us who are government junkies, that is such an important thing. And when's that going to happen? When's my copy going to arrive?
You'll go to the internet to get it, even better.
Oh, terrific! Because that has been one of the idea that we can link what happens in government to the budget, and the productivity is sensational. No questions. Where are the? Come on.
Up here comes one.
Good.
Hi, I'm Susan Lerner from Common Cause, New York. I'm the new ED. And I was...
Susan, just speak up a teeny weeny bit.
Okay, I'm the new ED for Common Cause, New York. And I want to thank you for all of your good work. And it's always exciting for my organization to hear ethics and transparency in government front and center in the minds of the council president. I was very impressed with the idea of council stats.
Me too.
I think it's a great management tool. But I'm wondering if it will be, whether you're going to be issuing perhaps annual, semi-annual reports that allow the public who has no idea of the volume of work that the council members do for their constituents to actually see what comes through the council offices and have a better idea of how the government's working.
Thank you for asking that, because actually what we're going to do is put monthly data of council stat up on the council's webpage. And we'll also compile that certainly into yearly reports. If we can do quarterly or twice a year as well, we'd like to do that. But we definitely will do yearly, and also have monthly data up on our webpage so people can access it. And then we'll also eventually like to get to the point where, say, the housing data or the transportation or whatever, that would find a way to email. That's part of all the data to the advocates in that issue area, or to the people on our email lists or mailing lists who have particular interests in those areas. But our hope is that, one, by putting it out on the council's webpage and also putting out reports, it'll do what you said, give people a real sense of what their government is doing. But also, by people seeing what's going on in their neighborhood or their borough, they may have good ideas for solutions that we might not have. Also, it creates the possibility of people, if people know that the area they live in is having X, Y, or Z problem, and then they're either through their own initiative or working with their council member, there's the possibility of forming community groups around that and neighborhood associations who could actually be working with us to help solve the problems. Some of the problems we're going to see in council staff are directly within the city's control. Some aren't. They're going to be up to the state or the federal government, so we're really going to need people, neighborhood activists, to work with us to get different changes made. You know, some of the issues, say, around stop signs are within the Department of Transportation's control. Some aren't. Some are implementing, in some cases, the DOT is implementing federal transportation regs. And if we're going to make it easier, for argument's sake, to get stop signs in neighborhoods, we all may have to go to D.C. together. And getting that info out there, I think, will help energize and organize people to get involved with the council in efforts like that.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Martin Heilweil. I'm something of a one-issue constituent, which is the rent laws from the tenant side. I see you brought an intro forward to give tenants the right to bring harassment actions or anti-harassment actions against the landlords. I wanted to thank you for that and wish you luck and your best efforts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. We have tried in the past 2 years to do a number of different things around tenants' issues in the city of New York, because one of the things sometimes that gets forgotten, in my opinion, about New York City is that it is a city of renters. The vast majority of residents in the city of New York are renters. Now, not that we don't love homeowners, we do, and we should do things to create more ownership opportunity, but the vast majority of New Yorkers are renters. That's in part why we passed the Safe Housing Law last year, which was a historic overhaul of how we do code enforcement in the city of New York. And working with HPD now, every year, you can still call HPD if you have a problem or a complaint, but in addition to that, the 200 worst buildings in the city every year are going to get head-to-toe inspections. And when the inspectors go, they're not just going to cite a hole in the ceiling that they see. In these buildings, they're going to be required to figure out what caused the hole in that ceiling, whether it was a bad roof, bad pipes, cite the landlord for that. Then we're going to give that bad landlord a window of opportunity to fix those problems. If he or she doesn't, we're going to take them to court, sue them for the money, and take their building if we have to. We're not going to keep their building because we are the worst landlords ever in the history of all time, the city of New York, but we can then put those buildings into appropriate programs to actually preserve them as affordable housing, but actually move away from the idea that in some neighborhoods, affordable housing means crappy housing, that we're going to bring housing up to code and make it livable. We've also, as part of our effort to really expand focus on renters in city government, introduced the bill that Martin mentioned that we're going to be passing in the next couple of weeks. It's a bill that's going to do something very significant, and I hope the lawyers in this room in particular will appreciate this. You know, right now, if you're a tenant, you can take your landlord to court every time you don't have heat, you don't have hot water, you don't have this, you don't have that. Well, sometimes landlords, and they're the minority, because most landlords are good, law-abiding people, but there are a minority of landlords who deny those services and do other things specifically with the intent of harassing you out of your apartment. Why? Because when they harass you out of their apartment through vacancy increases and other real diminishments that's happened in our rent laws, they can raise the rent and eventually get more money. But the tenant has to now go into court every single time, take time off from work, go into court. So we are changing the law in the city of New York to make harassment a violation of the city's housing maintenance code, which means tenants will now, when we pass this law, be able to go to court to charge their landlord with harassment if that is what is happening. And that, I think, one, will decrease harassment, which is the real point. We don't want to flood the courts. But also, two, give landlords, tenants, appropriate standing in court when they need it, when they are, in fact, being harassed. So thank you for raising that. And we're going to pass that in the next, early into this year, very soon.
Good morning, and thank you. Your initiatives sound very exciting. The news report of the mayor's State of the City address noted the fact that the mayor said that rather than raise taxes, he would look first to cutting the budget. And, of course, the news analyses all noted that someone who might be running for president doesn't want to be known as a tax hiker, and maybe that had something to do with it. Are we the victim of presidential ambitions on this issue? Do you agree with the mayor's approach of cutting the budget rather than finding new fees or taxes?
We need to remember, first of all, I think, the mayor gave a State of the City speech yesterday that was about New York City. and I think it was a clear plan for what he wants to do and continue to do over the next 12 months. I don't think it was a speech about running for president of the United States. Although I think my initiatives around middle schools and green markets are incredibly exciting. I'm not sure they're going to make a big difference in the Nevada caucuses, but you never know. We're headed into 2 tough budget years, and that's a fact. They might be a little worse, a little better. You won't know till the revenues come in, but they ain't going to be good, and they ain't going to be the past 2 years. Now, I wish we had a rainy day fund, like I said before, where we could have taken, the mayor and I and the council, we paid down about $2.5 billion worth of this year's debt last year. That was a good thing to do. It's not the best bang for $2 billion, I got to tell you. We would have basically we took down our debt service. But we would have been better off to actually have that in a rainy day fund. We don't have that by law yet. So you're left with 2 options. You either raise taxes, or you cut services to the best degree you can in ones that won't impact New Yorkers. Now, after September 11th, we raised property taxes very high in the city of New York. We had no choice. Last year, appropriately, we said to New Yorkers, we're doing well this year. We're going to take the property tax rate down 7%, which really kept people's bills flat. It didn't really made them take any less, but they didn't pay any more of how it works. We said we'd do that for a year. We couldn't commit for more than a year because we didn't know what this year would be. There are tough choices. Do you raise taxes? Do you cut services? But given the reality that we asked New Yorkers to pay so much more after September 11th, and that they did that for a number of years, I don't think there's anybody, whether they're running for anything or not running for anything, who wants to continue to ask New Yorkers to have to pay higher taxes. And we're going to do everything we can to try to avoid that. And I don't think that's about running, for anything else, but trying to be fair to New Yorkers and trying to recognize the sacrifice New Yorkers made from their own pocketbooks after September 11th. Now, the real job for all of us in city government, the commissioners who are here, the staff people who are here, the elected officials who are here, is the question of how do you go in to a $59 billion budget and find the money that's not working or the money that's wasteful. Because none of us are going to look you in the eye and tell you every dollar in that $59 billion budget is being spent. Well, it's impossible. But it's a big morass. You had to figure out a way you can go in surgically, with a scalpel versus with a hatchet and find those dollars that actually are expendable. I don't know what they are today, but our job is to find those dollars and to try to find those dollars versus cutting taxes or versus raising taxes or cuts to services that really will impact people. And that's our job over the next months.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Good morning. I'm Michael Gruen, an ordinary citizen.
I found most New York citizens are not ordinary, so and the ones who say they are usually are the least. So
you've had experience for a while with term limits.
Yes.
And are coming up against one, I believe.
Yes.
I wonder, in retrospect, looking at it now with your experience, you have any current thoughts on, say, such issues as reliance on staff, reliance on lobbyists, whether people with, I think it's 4 years of council experience can gain enough knowledge about the workings of the council and about the substantive issues. Could you comment on these?
I mean, I am not a supporter of term limits. I don't think they're good for government. That said, the voters have voted twice and said that they think they should be the law of this city, and they are, and they will continue to be that. But I think that the issues you raise, the degree to which term limits creates an over-reliance on staff, a climate in which it's easier for lobbyists to grow and gain influence, those are facts, and I don't think anybody can deny that those are byproducts, in my opinion, negative byproducts of term limits. So it's incumbent upon all of us in the city council and in other branches of government to recognize that and put in place reforms and efforts that are permanent, that will make sure the future people in office are, to the best degree we can, protected from those negative effects of term limits. I think something like council stat helps protect the council from an over-reliance on staff and lobbyists. One, because the next council members will have over 2 years of data of what we worked on. That'll give them a framework to look back on. 2, council members will have ongoing data to look at themselves. So that's one way to help preserve the history of the city council and a knowledge base. I think what we've done around campaign finance and lobbying law, it's a way to make sure, given the reality of term limits, that we create tougher ethical infrastructures. And in part, term limits, I think, puts that obligation on us to have even tougher ethical infrastructures to make sure that every 8 years, new people have really a smaller box in a way to operate in as it relates to lobbying and how the budget works. So that's why I think it's important that as many of the reforms as myself, the council, and the mayor talk about, that we do those in a way that are actually codified into law so they can't be at the whim of people who are coming in and out. But overall, I wish we didn't have term limits, but we do, and we have to figure out what we put in place to make sure we help those who will come in and out based on term limits. I will say one thing, though, because what I just said was fairly negative. The truth is that we should be proud of the elected officials who come in the context of term limits. I mean, in 2002, I can't remember the exact number, Robert, there was about 36 or 37 new council members in 2002. An extraordinarily difficult time in the city of New York. 37 new council members, I think 4 new borough presidents, a new comptroller, a new public advocate, and a new mayor at perhaps the city's lowest point. By all accounts, we should have failed with no blame put on any of us. And that's not what happened at all. The city's done, really recovered. Government has moved forward, reformed itself in a lot of ways, reinvigorated itself. So it makes it harder, but when it's New Yorkers, I think you really can get anything done, and we've shown that, but we have to make sure we make it easier for the next group, too.
What is the number of council members that will go out?
Yeah, a lot of council members will go out at the end of 2009. The number keeps changing a little bit. It's like 35, 36 again. It could change. A couple council members are running for state senate, so that could change. But it'll be in the mid to high 30s. Yeah, it'll be not dissimilar, give or take, to 2001. Thank you. Yes.
Good morning. My name is John Ost. I serve on the board of directors of Southbridge Towers. It's a 1,600 development over by the seaport.
Yeah.
Our problem.
You're lucky. That's good, yeah.
I have a beautiful view of police headquarters, which is not very uplifting.
Yeah.
Basically, what's happened.
But they're doing good, so that should make you feel good.
Not really. They've taken over a large footprint in our area since 2001. They've kept a lot of streets closed.
That is true.
Which has made.
Interrupt a second, but George Grasso, first deputy police commissioner, is over there. If you'd like to have a chat.
Oh, I absolutely would. They've taken over a large footprint, basically saying that they need the area for security. In fact, a lot of the area is used for the parking of government employees using commuter vehicles. And the construction which you experienced this morning is horrible in Lower Manhattan.
Yes. Yes.
So, but my question is, our councilman has tried to help us, our community board has tried to help us, but we basically have gotten nowhere with the police department. Is there some mechanism, maybe council stat would be that mechanism, where the city council, maybe as a body rather than an individual council person, could have more oversight over these very, very large agencies which are not relevant in response to community needs? Is there something that you could possibly do in the time that you have left as speaker to help us with this problem?
Sure. Let me say a couple of things. I mean, first, when I think the police department is doing well, and I do think we do need to recognize, and Commissioner Grasso and others deserve a lot of credit for this, the city's crime rate is at, the lowest ever, and the degree to which murders have decreased is extraordinary. And a fact that's really remarkable is that within the what's it, 479, is that right? 497, I was just a flip there, murders that have happened. A very significant portion of those are murders amongst people who know each other, and those are particularly hard to get down, though the department, through some very significant innovations, have even begun to get those type of homicides down, which is a tremendous accomplishment. Now, that said, you have to balance the reality of those great successes amongst the fact that the police department and every other department exists in the city of New York, where we're all very literally close to each other, and how do you balance that? So let me say a couple of different things. One, I think you're right. Council stat will help us see, is what you guys are experiencing being next to headquarters. How similar is that to what people may or may not be experiencing next to precincts? You know what I mean? Is that an agency problem, or is it just a headquarters problem? We'll be able to take a look at that. We could take a look also at 311. That would help us see that. One thing I do think that's going to make a difference both around headquarters but also citywide is the steps that the mayor has said he's taking around limiting the number of parking placards that city workers are going to get. That's going to, I think, help, one, overall. Two, I think, Council Stat and 311, we should look at that and see. Three, we would be happy from the Speaker's office to work with Councilmember Gerson and the Police Department to see what can be done, particularly, around Southbridge and your area. I don't know the exact nature of what the vehicles are or where they are and the degree to which some are cars officers are using for commuting and others are actually ones that are needed because of security. And you're absolutely right that after and since September 11th, there have been many street closures in Lower Manhattan, and there's been efforts to try to get those streets back open, but that has impacted Lower Manhattan. It's impacted Chinatown. It's had a very negative effect in places. And I think the city's trying very hard to figure out how you balance the reality of post 9/11 life in New York City and our need to be, incredibly ready in the battle against terror. How do you balance that with the reality of people living in neighborhoods? And I don't, we're mindful of that. That doesn't mean we always get the balance right. And the degree to which we can help in the conversation with the police department and assist Councilmember Gerson, we're more than happy to do that. So I'd just ask if you'd see Andy Grossman over here, make sure he has your information, and we'll follow up with you on that, because I know I speak for the commissioner in saying that we want to get that balance right, and one part of finding that balance is finding ways to be in communication, and maybe we can figure out some kind of liaison from the department to your tenants association, and maybe that would be one step towards moving things forward. And then this is my last question.
Not a question.
We'll take one more because Sally's online. No, Sally, you paid for half the breakfast. You get a question.
Not a question, just a comment. I'll be very brief. My name is Carol Post. I'm the Director of Agency Services at the Mayor's Office of Operations.
Oh, great.
Along with my colleague Anthony Longo, we are responsible to produce the Mayor's Management Report. So I welcome your comments about linking the budget to the performance, and we look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you very much. And I'd say that the Mayor's Management Report, in the years I've seen it, over the past 6 years, has really already gone through a tremendous transformation into a really usable document. So thank you guys very much for that effort. And that's a lot of data to crunch and munch, so that's not easy. Okay. And a round of applause for Tony Longo. Yay!
Thank you. For Sally Goodgold. About a month or so ago, there was a 20% spate in hate crimes in the city. And I have attended a number of meetings with the police commissioner, which George can attest to. He's gone to all of the different communities. But other than the police commissioner and the mayor, of course, you have taken the biggest interest in this. And I was at your press conference. And apparently what's happening is that kids are drawing swastikas in some places and nooses in other places. I understand a swastika is considered a registered hate symbol, but a noose is not, and they do not get the same penalty. And one affects one minority group and one affects another, and we cannot get as much response. Someone has to either make it a law or something that a noose is a hate crime symbol the same way a swastika is. And I don't know if that's a council job, but you've alerted people to it, and I don't know what the next step is, but I'd love to see something happen so that's as bad as, it's hard to say which is badder, but they're both terrible.
Well, let me say two things. One, thank you, Sally, for your support in our efforts in the council. There has been in recent reports about a 20% increase in reports of hate crimes to the police department. And we are very lucky in the city of New York to have outstanding hate crimes task force. I've worked with these men and women for a long time. Before being on the city council, I was the director of the New York City Gay and Lesbian Anti-Violence Project, where they have a large hate crimes unit. And our task force in the police department is extraordinary. And one part of fighting hate crimes is catching the people who commit those crimes and prosecuting them to the fullest extent of the hate crimes law and sending them to jail, to send a message that this is not something we tolerate, and you may think these crimes are a joke, but they're not, and you will serve time if you commit these crimes. But the hate crimes task force is really there after they've happened. They're not, beat cops who are out there deterring crime. Now, that prosecution and the great job our DAs does prosecute crime. But the other thing that decreases hate crimes is when people of goodwill stand up and say, this is not going to happen in my neighborhood, this isn't acceptable, it may not have happened to me or somebody from my community, but if it happens to anybody, it happens to everybody. And that's why on November 29th, we organized, which Sally was referencing, a day out against hate in the city of New York. We have nights out against crime. We organized a day out against hate, where we had 6 events in 5 boroughs. We had a religious leaders breakfast in Brooklyn, a summit with 200 high school kids in Staten Island, a midday meeting in Queens with middle school students and Holocaust survivors. We went to a youth service program in the Bronx that has an after-school program of a tolerance curriculum. We met with college students in Manhattan and with union leaders in Manhattan to talk about how to fight hate crimes on the job. It was an unbelievable day in the events of the day, but also in the energy of people who want to keep working on this issue. So recently, when there were swastikas drawn on a synagogue in Brooklyn, we were able to email to that whole list of people from that day, and those participants reached out to that rabbi and the members of the synagogue to say, we're with you, whatever we can do to support you. Just Wednesday night of this week, I was back out in Staten Island with the borough president. He, in response to that meeting we had that day, has now created an Ambassadors Against Hate program in all of the high schools on Staten Island. We met with 50 of those ambassadors on Wednesday night, and those are kids in high school who are now going to be working in their schools to be resources when hate crimes happen. So it's really a lot of great things are happening to expand tolerance in our city. The issue Sally raised around legislation to expand the number of symbols that are categorized as hate symbols. One is a noose. There may be others to look at, too. That is a piece of state legislation that has been introduced. We have a resolution in the council in support of it. But the hate crimes law being part of the penal code is something that is regulated by the state legislature. But it's something we should all add our voices to the call to get passed, because when you pass hate crimes laws and implement them, you almost always see a corresponding, after the fact, decrease in hate crimes, because it sends a message to the ignorant folks who do this that society will not tolerate it, and that is our best weapon.
Thank you for your leadership in this.
Thank
I just
you,
wanted
Sally.
everyone
Thank
to
you
say
all.
that.
Thank you.
Stay right here for a second.
Okay.
Thank you. One of the treats of these breakfasts is to be with somebody and to get a sense of their energy and knowledge, and we have seen somebody at the top of her form today. It really was terrific. Thank you for the breadth of the talk and the excitement that you brought to the room. As we always do, we like to give a product of the scholarship of our law school, and this present a book by my colleague Annette Gordon-Reed, Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy, and we present it to you with thanks for a wonderful morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure.